And that's it. So before we get to the matter at hand, since it's really been a while since I've done this, I want to just open this up to questions. So people come, they listen, they hear talks, they read, they listen to podcasts, a lot available. But any questions you might have about Buddhism or what we do here or meditation practice, I want to open it up. And don't be shy, or just if there's anything that's not clear to you, please just raise your hand. I know I kind of dropped it on you, but yes, sir. I just wait. We have a lot of people online, so this is so they can hear.
What is just, and forgive me because I'm not 100% familiar with all the terms.
That's fine, yeah, that's why we're doing this. Yes,
But
sir.
what is the lineage or the main focus or practice here? Like what lineage do you follow? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if I'm using the right word or not,
Yeah,
but
that's
like,
okay.
I know there are different types of Buddhism.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I'm asking, what type of Buddhism is practiced here?
Good. So again, let me just say that if you go to our website, there'll be more explanation of all that, so I'm not trying to beg the question, but I'll answer you. Yeah, so basically, we practice within the Buddhist tradition, generally, which means the whole body corpus of Buddhist teachings. Specifically, my own training is in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition of Zen and Dzogchen, which is the sort of in the Tibetan system, very much similar to Zen, but a little different. So that's where, and I've been practicing for 50 years, had wonderful teachers, and so that's what's being transmitted here. Because Thich Nhat Hanh was one of my main teachers, the way he taught and a lot of his, the way he expressed Buddhism for our modern times really is pervasive, because his whole emphasis was updating Buddhism so it's relevant to the lives of people, right? Not just kind of something like you do over here at the temple or the church or the mosque, but something that really penetrates people's lives. And we have different paths. Again, if you go online, what's your name? Juan? Yeah, so if you go online, you'll see we have kind of a developmental path here in our community, from the path of mindful living to the Dharma path to the wisdom path. So it's a evolutionary model. Yeah, I mean, Buddhism is a little confusing because it's very decentralized, and so it sort of changed every time it went to a different culture or country. So, and then lots of divisions, like you said, lots of different lineages, lots of overall traditions, so it can be a little confusing, so it's a good question. Okay. Other questions? This means everybody's clear? No questions? That's great. You're clear about your practice, you're clear about Buddhism, you're clear about the teachings.
There is a question online.
Question online, yeah.
How can we maintain equanimity when something terrible happens in our lives? How do we say it's okay when it's not and find peace still?
Again, the whole reason to practice a spiritual path is to give us the capacity of being present to life with its ups and downs, its happinesses and its unhappinesses. And all the challenges and difficulties of life, individual life, interpersonal life, communal life, life of the world. Yeah, so that's what we all deal with. The practice gives us the ability to deal with all of this with equanimity. Right? And then is that easy? No, but usually it's twofold. One fold is sort of what we're doing today, which is the inner peace, right? That we develop within each of us equanimity. And the equanimity we develop is the equanimity of mindfulness and awareness. Because all these events that we are talking about, that are going on within us or in the world or in the people around us or are all being kind of experienced in our mind, right? That which is aware of all this is our mind. And so if our mind is able to experience whatever's arising with clarity and equanimity, even in difficult situations, the mind can fundamentally be equanimous, fundamentally. So finding that place, it's not really not a place, but finding that place within oneself that is a place of clarity and stability and awareness that's always here, always available. Finding that inner ground, is essential, right? So that's kind of the inner peace which comes from meditation. Right? Or we could say having an inner life, right? Having an inner life. But at the same time, as important is what's in Buddhism is called the view. How do we view what's going on in this world? How do I view what's going on in my life? How do I view what's going on in my family, in my relationships, in my community, in the world? How do I make sense of that? Right. And so in Buddhism, there are some very clear kind of constructs that help us understand this world. Especially the things that are most, I guess the things we would say that we really don't want to be happening. You see, most of us do not have a problem when things are going on in the world that we like or that we think should be happening, right? That's no problem. That's no challenge. But it's all the things in the world that are going on that we say should not be, right? And that we resist. This is where our equanimity gets disturbed. So we need a way to understand and open up to the world as it is. So the Buddha said very fundamental teachings about how to view this world. One of the ways we view this world is that everything is impermanent. Everything is constantly changing. Nothing is stable. Anywhere. Both in the greater realm of daily news and daily, what's ever going on in the world, but also within our own minds. Thoughts, ideas constantly changing. Within our bodies, constantly changing sensations. Birth and death. Everything's unstable, right? Everything is constantly changing. So that's one way to view this world. Because we seek what? We want permanence. We want things to be permanent. We want things to be stable. And it's not that way at all. So, another truth of Buddhism is the truth of what's called cause and effect. Why are things the way they are? Because of causes and conditions. Right? Whatever situation that's upsetting to you, when we understand it is occurring only because of causes and conditions. When we understand that, and we're actually willing to look deeply into the causes and conditions, our own causes and conditions, the causes and conditions of another person, we say, I can't understand why they're doing what they're doing. They have their causes and conditions. Countries have their causes and conditions. The variables are endless, right? But that's also the truth. Everything is arising because of causes and conditions. So we can't say this shouldn't be happening, but it's happening. Right. So our view has to be wide enough that we can incorporate everything, the so-called wanted and unwanted. The things we think should be and the things we think shouldn't be. They're all arising in this world. In our life and in ourselves. Many people have trouble just being equanimous with themselves. They don't think they should be who they are. So it's multifaceted. And the other way of viewing things, beside impermanence and these others, is that essentially, because everything is impermanent, everything is constantly changing, because everything is rising according to cause and conditions, and there's so many variables beyond our control, the happiness and the stability and the peace that we seek can never be found in the world. Because there's no stability, and everything is changing. Right? So all our pleasures, the world has lots of pleasures. You know, the problem with pleasure is what? It ends. You know, what a drag. Right? Right? What a drag. But that's the truth. You know? Good times end, bad times end. I mean, you know, it's just, there's no, if we want a consistent kind of happiness and well-being and open-heartedness, we have to develop that within ourselves and then radiate that out to the world. So understanding, you know, the world is the way it is. Right? People are the way they are. And they're very unstable. They're very, very unpredictable. They're all driven by their causes and conditions. And if I really want to be at peace and stable, I need to understand that. So I'm not always upset, okay, by people and the world. So in answer to your question, you know, how do you find equanimity? Through practice, through meditation practice, and also most importantly is having a what Buddhism is called a right view, which is not like right versus wrong, it's like clear, right? It's like, you know, the Buddhist teaching is based on observation, right? It's not theological, it's not metaphysical, right? He observed the world around him. He observed what was going on around him. And he discovered certain truths about life. And it's amazing, 2,600 years ago, totally different historical situation, cultural, et cetera, and they're still as relevant today, the fundamental truth. Because humans haven't changed. Except maybe for the worst, I don't know. Other questions before we... Okay. So today is Easter, of which I have no expertise to talk about Easter, but I was interested in two things. One thing was this idea of resurrection, rising from the dead. Right. I thought I could relate to that. And this idea of the Holy Trinity, that somehow there are different aspects of God and the Godhead and the manifestation, the Spirit, which is also, I think, so anyhow, so that's what I thought I'd talk about today, and then we can talk about it. So if and people who know more about Christianity, please correct me. So Christ was crucified on the cross, is that correct? He died, is that correct? And then 3 days later, he arose, and he was seen, right? Which was proof that what? So people who believe in that, so the fact that he arose 3 days later, that he hadn't died when people thought he physically had died, was proof that what? What? Divine. That he was divine. Right? Whatever that means, and that probably has lots of different ideas what divine means. But he was more than his physical body. That's what he manifested. He was more than his physical body, because his physical body, everybody observed, died. Right? And yet, 3 days later, something else is manifesting. which is proof that, again, that he had this divine essence. And so whether anyhow, I won't get into that. So that's very Buddhistic, that fundamental way of looking at things. Because one of our major delusion meaning that we misperceive the reality, the truth of what's going on, is that we believe that only the material world is real. Right? That's materialist. And we clearly identify ourselves and everybody else as being who they are in their body. So we ourselves think, yeah, who am I? Me. We look in the mirror and we see that person and we say, that's me. Is that true? Right? So this is all the way we identify with our physical body, and we identify everybody else with their physical body. And we also, very clearly, when people die, depending on what we think's going on, that also relates a lot to our experience. For many people, when people die, we think what? They have left, haven't they? Because we see their body inert. If you ever go to a funeral, you see the person there, right? Especially if they, the funeral director did a good job. They often look a lot better than they might have looked for a long time. But we know they're dead, right? And so we feel they've left us. And we're bereft often because we thought incorrectly that they were their physical body. And now they're gone. In the same way, I think Christ and his followers thought that what? When they saw him crucified and he was dead, right? They took him down, they thought he was gone. So his manifestation showed that, no, there's something else going on here, right? That's not obvious to the physical senses. Right? Because in the physical senses, we see them, they're inert. If you ever touch someone who's died, they're cold, right? They still have a mouth, but when you try to talk to them, they don't answer, right? So what is that is left, you see? Right? The body is still there, but something is no longer there. So I guess my sense is that in Christianity, it is that thing that happened 3 days later was that manifestation of the deathless aspect, right? Being manifest. But in the Buddhist tradition, well, I think it ends in the same place, different terminology and all that. That is what the Enlightenment is about. Right? And in the Buddhist tradition, we want to awaken, right? We want to awaken to our true nature, which is not bound by the physicality of our body and experience. So in a certain way, we might say that we want to go through, in a certain way, in our practice, a spiritual death, we might say. Not a physical death. We don't need to wait till we die for proof that there's an aspect of who we are which is not contained by the physical world. We can realize that. And when can we realize it? This is the really fascinating thing. When can we realize the deathless? Right now. Right now. It is not something out there. It's not something that we awaken to after death. It's not something we have to go and find or seek or become. Right? The essential message of the Buddha's teaching and the Buddha's enlightenment is that is available to us right now. But unfortunately, what do we have to do? What? Practice. But what? Yeah, we have to die to what? What? We have to die to our delusions about that I am my physical body. I am my senses. Right? Because as you know, as I said, when you see a dead body, their eye is still there, their ear is still there, their nose is still there, their tongue is still there, right? Everything's still there, but something has left. Something is no longer present, and that is what? That is the mind of awareness. That is the one that animates and gives life to us and everyone in it. Right? But because we don't see that and understand the commonality of that essence of what it means to be a human being, in Buddhism we call that everybody's a Buddha. Everybody is awakened already. Everybody has a pure nature already. That is our nature. Because we don't know that, we live sort of not a real life, you see. We lead sort of a kind of a shallow life. Because we're so focused on this world of things, right? We're so focused on this material world that we can see and touch and feel and hear every day. We think that's all it is. We don't know that every human being has another aspect of who they are that is beyond all that, in which all this is arising. So we don't have to wait to die. Now, then you have teachings that come along, like Zen and Dzogchen and Thich Nhat Hanh, right? Who says it's really quite simple. You know, it may not be the profundity of the Buddha's awakening and a full enlightenment, but you're lost in a drama. You're lost in something that's happening, right? Everybody know what I'm talking about. You're running a story about life, right? And that's conditioning, how you're feeling, what's going on in your mind. It may be conditioning the way you're relating, right? We're running a story. Everybody know what I'm talking about. Why don't you just think about all the stories you've been running today, last night. We're endlessly running stories. You might be running a story about me. You might be running a story about who knows what we're running stories about, right? And we think these stories about the material world are real, solid, permanent things. But that's not true, is it? They're just made up of what? What? Thoughts. They're all just made up of thoughts. But when we see our thoughts as material things, when we see our feelings as material things, solid and permanent, you know, then we're what? Stuck. So, we're running our story. And all of a sudden we remember, oh, there's a present moment reality occurring right now that's something that I'm not relating to. Because I'm just relating to my thoughts. I might even be relating to my thoughts about what's going on right now. So all of us have this opportunity of coming out of this dream and awakening to the reality of this present moment. And when you're touching, by your mindful presence and awareness, the full experience of every moment, in that moment, there's no birth or death, which are just concepts. When you're in a place where you're just totally present and aware to what's going on, in a certain sense, you have been reborn. Reborn into what? Reality. The way things really are. Instead of living in our thoughts and creating a reality made up of thoughts and concepts and beliefs and ideas, which is all made up of how we're taking in the data of this world and turning it into solid things. We even do that with ourselves. We turn ourselves into a story. Most of us have stories about who I am, right? I was born here, experienced this, blah, 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 blah. You know, we have our own story, our own, we have our own memoir that we carry around with us. But that's just a story. Because the truth is, right now, none of us are a story. Just close your eyes a second. Right now, none of us are a story. The story of who you are is what you carry in your mind, made up of thoughts and memories and perceptions. But if you let go of all that and go, right now, in this present moment, who am I? I mean, that's a fascinating question. If I let go of the story of who I am, if I am resurrected from the story, from the narrative of who I am, or who people told me I am, when I wake up from that, I'm resurrected into what? Into truth. The reality of this present moment that has no birth and death, no past or present. It's just here. And in this moment, there's great freedom, great creativity. To be free of the story. So just take that in for a moment. A nice question to ask ourselves is, who would I be if I didn't have a story about myself? All our conditioning, societal, cultural, familial. How do I get free of all that? To awaken to who I really am. So in Buddhism, this is resurrection. And we can touch this. It's always available to us. We can always wake up to it, even if we've forgotten for the last 3 hours. We can always come back, because this is always here. So let's open this up. What do you think about all this? A load of Buddhist baloney? True? I don't know. In the back? And people online, just chat it in to Brian. He's there, and he'll relay your questions to me.
So I'm just wondering, I'm in graduate school, so it involves a lot of theory and
Yeah, yeah.
conceptualization. So how do I balance that mindful awareness with having to go through the world and make conceptualizations or deal with them? You know, like academic stuff like
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
How to balance thinking with perceiving.
Yeah. So again, this is the nature of our world, right? Which is different than the nature of really the Buddha's time. I mean, essentially it's the same, right? But yeah, I mean, his world and the really world for, human history until very recently wasn't so, burdened by conceptual thinking, right? I mean, that was, I don't know, people who were intellectuals or something, or theologians, or, you know what I'm saying? But most people just what? Tilled the soil, or you know what I mean? Just did. So, you're right. Or even it wasn't that long ago that to go to university was for the elite, right? I mean, these days, pretty much anybody can go to school, so anybody can fill their mind now with all kinds of ideas and theories. Right. So that's just the way it is. Okay. So this is the world we live in. Now, right, so let's say you're a carpenter. And to be a carpenter, you have to master all kinds of skills to do your job effectively. But hopefully that carpenter does not believe that he's just a hammerer. He's just a screwer, right? And hopefully you will believe that these concepts, these ideas that you're having to learn and play with are not you. They're just ideas and thoughts that you need to master this body of knowledge that you're supposed to have to do your profession, right? So these are just tools, but they're not you. The you is the one who's aware of those thoughts, concepts. As long as you keep that distinction, and you're keeping the mirror of your mind through meditation and other types of ways kind of clean, you can enter the world of ideas and concepts and all this stuff without being distorted. But if you forget that, and all of a sudden all this stuff becomes really real, right? I mean, like right now, all those, how old are you, Ray? 24. And so how many ideas and concepts have you stuffed into that poor head of yours over the last 24 years? A lot. Yeah. But if I said to you right now, if you looked in your mind, where are they all? Just close your eyes. Do you see like thousands and hundreds of thousands of ideas and thoughts and book titles? When you look right in your mind, there's nothing there. I mean, so your mind is essentially free of it all. But we don't know that because we so identify with all this stuff. So meditation is to kind of get the right view and to keep the mind clear. So you can read, you can learn, but it doesn't weigh you down. They're just ideas, they're just fluff. Like skywriting, you know what skywriting is? You look up there and you see the sky and it's either writing, but there's no substance to it, right? It just dissolves. All those things you're learning will dissolve. Anybody here remember everything they've learned in all their education? Every idea, remember every book you read and, No. Somebody up here to quote? Okay. Rex, and again, online, just...
Yeah, a few minutes ago, you were talking about the existence of some essence of us beyond the physical and our thoughts. And when you said that, it ran into an idea that my understanding of Buddha's teaching that there is no soul, there is no Atman, there is no spiritual permanent
Right.
existence. Can you kind of help me understand
Yeah.
how those two ideas, how to reconcile those two
Yeah,
ideas?
so now we're getting sort of the deep end. I won't go too much into it because, yeah, so Rex, if you close your eyes, everybody just close their eyes and kind of look into your mind, where whatever you think your mind is, wherever you think it is, just look into it right now. Do you see a solid thing called a mind? That has shape, you know, I mean, the definition of a thing is it has characteristics. It would have shape and color and dimension and can you see that when you look into your mind? Can you see a thing called your mind? Have you found it, Rex? No. But yet, we would acknowledge that you do have this awareness and this capacity of knowing that all these things that we call our mind, and yet it's immaterial. That's why it's not a thing. So when the Buddha said, you know, he didn't say there wasn't a subjective experience of something called a mind or me or something that knows. I mean, so that's why his understanding was very subtle. Right. Right. He says even that which they, you know, in the Vedic time they called the soul there's nothing there that has any dimension. But yet there's something that knows. So that's why Buddhism is always both and. You know, form is emptiness, emptiness is form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is, it's like saying it's beyond all those characteristics. The problem is if you're trying to intellectually understand this, it's hard. Because Buddhism is a both and. It's not an either or kind of teaching. So we talk about a mind, we meditate. I've been talking all about our minds and how we calm our mind, and right, and that's certainly true. But at a deeper level, it's not true. And that's the. What? Yeah, there's brain tissue. Yeah, that's all the physical.
Confined.
Yeah, brain tissue is confined.
Right.
Yeah, that's the organ. But what is it that animates the organ? What is this? What is this life force that animates us? See, that's what, you know, each of us right now, we're alive. There's an aliveness, right? What is that? Is that just, you know, a material, you know, is that just produced by material? Or is there something else going on here? You know, is this mind much vaster and more mysterious than brain tissue? Right? And this is the problem, you see, because when we live in a materialistic culture, we go, what? It's got to be weighed, it's got to be seen, it's got to be, you know, I mean, that's a scientific model, right? It's, you know, but it's based on material, you know, that's why it's so fascinating if you follow just all the science, the cognitive sciences and all this research they're doing on meditation, you know, what are they discovering? Things that practitioners have known for thousands of years. Right? I remember, 20, 30 years ago when all of a sudden brain plasticity, you remember, for those who are older, you remember that was this great discovery. Right? Everybody thought, oh, the brain, it can't change, you know, it's all, and all of a sudden they discovered, you know, through different technology, the plasticity of the brain, yeah, your thoughts, your feelings, all are conditioning this brain, and actually brain change, brain waves change. You know, fascinating. And yet, you know, So there's more, again, we live in a, the world used to be very all over the place with all kinds of ideas and spiritual and metaphysics and all, right? Remember that? I mean, everybody had all kinds of beliefs and spirits and gods and demons and, there was a, right? And then along came what? Science and rationality, right? Which was good. But then it went way over here, you see, like, So we want to, it's both and. It's both and. I mean, the interesting thing that, people like Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, I mean, they say Buddhism has to agree with science, right? Because it's based on observation of reality. Okay? Vivian?
What the Buddhist
Just hold it up like that.
what the Buddhist methodology, or even your own opinion, think, since we were talking about Jesus, how the dead and all that happened, what do you think of Buddha's methodology comments about people who can see, like mediums, like a person who is a medium and can see or have a conversation with someone who is not physical
Right, yeah,
here.
yeah. So you're saying the whole world of mediums, people who can, channel people who've died, the whole shamanic traditions, that have been part of human beings, or people who can see the future, or people, you know what I mean? All these kinds of situations. I don't know. I think that's really interesting. It makes life a lot richer, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, I don't... See, the Buddha, it's interesting. All this stuff was at the Buddha's time, I mean, because he grew up in a culture that had a lot of shamanic influences, right? Every tree had a tree spirit, and every mountain had a mountain spirit, and there were, demonic forces, and there were good, that was, right? And there was seers, and there were, all the New Agey kind of stuff goes back, ancient times, right? So that was all there. Now, the Buddha did not reject any of that, but he did reject it in saying the problem with all that stuff is it doesn't lead you to freedom and liberation. Right? It's a skill. Right? I can contact the dead, so if you want to talk to your dead grandmother, it's nice to know somebody who can contact her. I mean, I never quite understood that, because in Buddhism we have this idea of rebirth, but somehow, maybe they do exist in some plane, right? So that's fine. But the Buddha said, I teach the end of suffering. That's what I want to teach. I want to help people be free. I want to help people be happy. And so, right? So, I mean, phones are great, aren't they? I don't understand how they work, but I mean, they're great. You pick it up and you can talk to anybody in the world, right? You can talk to people anywhere in the world and they sound like they're right here. I mean, to me, that's magical. It's like talking to the dead. Right? So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can do that'll process the information of this world in new ways. But does that make me happy? Does that end my suffering? And the Buddha said no, because the suffering is created by my mind. So he just didn't get into it. He wouldn't, if you read the Buddha's teaching, he wouldn't get into theological debates. He wouldn't get into metaphysical debates. His great analogy was of the guy who's shot by the arrow. Everybody know that? Yeah. Anybody not know the arrow? Yeah. So the Buddha, there's a philosopher. He's out in the woods, And there's a hunting party also there, out there probably with their, bows and arrows, hunting deer. And by mistake, this philosopher, philosopher up in their heads, this philosopher gets hit by an arrow. So he's got an arrow maybe in his belly, right? So he's not dead, he's alive, but he's got wounded. So, all of a sudden one of the hunters realized they didn't hit a deer, they hit somebody. So they go over to him and reach down to pull it out. And the philosopher says, hold on a second. Just wait a moment, The shaft of the arrow, what kind of wood is it made from? So the person said, I don't know, so he said it's ash wood or I don't, who knows. Good, all right, then he reaches down to pull it out, right? But that's what, and the philosopher says, oh, hold on a second. But the feather, that's on the end of the arrow, what kind of bird did it come from? You see, and the point, and the guy keeps wanting to pull it out, and he keeps giving him, and the arrow, the tip of the arrow, what kind of stone does that come from? All right, so finally he goes through the whole thing, and the bow, and what kind of wood with the bow and the string, and and then after he tells him all that, he's like, because he's bleeding, and the guy says, the philosopher says, but hold on, tell me a little about the person who shot the arrow. Right, who are they? Where do they come from? What's their background? See, can you see where this is going? Right. You don't see where this is going. So, I'm not sure if this is how it goes, but let's just say he dies. Right, he dies, has all these questions, he just bleeds out. Okay, he dies. Right? And the Buddha, he told the story in the context of if there's an arrow in you, which means if you have suffering in you, the first thing you need to do is what? Remove the arrow. After that, you can have, discussions about the arrow and the person who shot, that's all our questions about, where to come, blah, 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 It's like the Buddha, he was very practical. He said, I teach one thing, the end of suffering. Nirvana, which is, happiness, well-being, peace of mind, deep understanding. So he was very, and if anybody knows the Vedic tradition, India, very metaphysical, lots of debates. And actually, his followers got into that in the following generations. But the Buddha was very clear. I'm here to help human beings wake up to who they are and free themselves from their suffering. That's what I'm here to teach. Okay? Yes, Didi? And again, anybody online? Yes, Didi?
So I appreciate your association of the resurrection with enlightenment. And I'd like you to talk more about enlightenment because it seems like that's what we're all wanting, and we're practicing, like to get to Carnegie Hall, and we become a little bit more aware bit by bit, and we try to be present in the moment with the breath. And yet, I think many of us are not quite there yet. And I'm wondering if you have any other suggestions about expediting the process.
Well, I mean, I could just go to that, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, like you said, and the answer is practice, practice, practice. So, I could say that, right? The more you practice, the more diligent you are in your practice, the more energy, time you give to the full range of practices we talk about. Yeah, we will expedite our process of awakening. Awakening means we're becoming more enlightened. The idea that somehow, the Buddha had an enlightenment experience, right? He had an experience in which he became enlightened, meaning the light went on as to the true nature of who he was and the true nature of life, right? But that didn't necessarily make him an enlightened being, Because there's a difference in Buddhism between an enlightenment experience and actually living it. Now, the Buddha obviously was somebody who could live it. So he's called the Buddha. The Buddha just means the enlightened one. Right? Before he became enlightened, he was just called Siddhartha. Right? So this was a name given to him. And so most of us are probably not as energetic and determined as Siddhartha was, right? Remember, I mean, he what? I mean, when his spiritual yearning and his existential angst kind of became very dominant with him, I mean, he walked away from his life, which was a good life, right? And he just devoted himself, 6, 7, 8 years just to, day and night practice, right? Studying under great masters, finally going his own way, right? So he was all in, right? Most of us are not all in, are we? I mean, anybody about to, renounce everything and just, I mean, he not only renounced everything, he had a good life going. I mean, he just went out there with nothing. No money, no food, no nothing. Right? I mean, what an act of faith in his path. But anybody can do that when they leave here today? No. We are lay people, we are householders, we are in life, right? So our process is going to be more gradual. Right? So we want to, I would say a better way of looking at it is, how can I in my life become more and more awake? More and more enlightened as to the true nature of things, right? How willing am I to challenge the fundamental ways that I have of looking at the world and looking at myself and looking at people, that I have absorbed from family, from culture, from all this stuff. Am I really willing to really turn all my beliefs and look through a new lens? So the more we do that, we will become more awake. Right. I mean, it's funny. Thich Nhat Hanh. I mean, I remember one of the wonderful things I heard about him early on, because I'd come to him from a Zen tradition where it was an experience you wanted. Very, very, very oriented toward an experience. And so when I met him, he said, every moment we have the capability of having an awakening experience, of being liberated. How we live that moment, how we live this moment. And so he said, so as opposed to kind of some experience we're going to have out there, he says, transformation is the ability to have more and more awakened moments, more and more liberated moments. So every time you get caught, Dee Dee, you know what I mean by getting caught? Everybody knows their own stuff, right? Every time you get caught, just close your eyes. Let's all just close our eyes. So every time we get caught in our stuff, everybody know what their stuff is. Every time you get stuck in your stuff, every time you get stuck in attachment and aversion, all those moments am I committed to liberating myself, moment to moment? That's a very different matter than thinking it's out there. Right? Moment to moment, do I want to be free? How free do I want to be? Moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day. So this teaching that he gave us is a great gift, because it it puts the matter in our hands, and it's doable. You know, it's like, you know, people in the recovery movement, right? In the recovery movement, what do they say? One day at a time. Anybody heard that? Right. It's profound, because if you ask most alcoholics, especially when they're trying to get sober, right? Can you stay sober the rest of your life? That's big, isn't it? That's big. Who knows? It's overwhelming. Right? Can I never take a drink again? Can I never take drugs, you know, again, in my whole life? That's big, isn't it? But to say to yourself, can I stay sober today? Right? Can I not use today? That's doable, isn't it? Is that true? Right. You know, that's within our grasp, no matter how addicted we are to something. Yeah, that's always, you know, just today. Can I get through today and not use? And then the more days you have like that, what? Yeah, so, you know, so that's great advice. One day at a time. And that's a great advice to practice, you know. Except we go one moment at a time. You know, can I wake up? It's like when we're, you know, when I gave the meditation instructions earlier, and I said, yeah, the practice is the practice of letting go. Eventually, you get better at not being stuck. But at this point, the practice is what? Getting better at letting go. How do you get better at letting go? Take a guess. How do you get better at letting go? What? Surrender, and every time you get stuck, you do what? You let go. So when you see, oh, that's the muscle. See, we don't need to develop the muscle of attachment to our thoughts, do we? No, that's totally strong. You see? I mean, that's a very strong muscle. Right? You know, the muscle of identifying with self and egocentricity, and, right? Strong muscle. We don't have to work on it, do we? We got to work on the other muscle. And that's the muscle of letting go. You know, in this moment, juicy thought, blah, blah, blah. So can I just let it go? Just a thought. Good thought, bad thought, high thought, low thought. Can I just let them go? When I'm in meditation. So that's a muscle that we develop. Now, having looked more deeply into the nature of mind, etc., makes it easier, but just as a practice. So if you think about it, you're in your meditation, you want to what? The instruction is be aware of what? What was the instruction this morning? Anybody remember? The instruction this morning was focus on your what? On your breath, on your body. How simple. You know, even a baby can do that. That's what they're doing. Okay. And yet, within 1 minute, what's happened? What's happened? Anybody practice this morning? Within 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 seconds? What happens? What? Thoughts come in, which isn't the problem, because sounds come in. But thoughts come in and we what? We follow them, we grab at them, right? We don't just let them move through the mind, right? Okay. But they are just moving through the mind. I mean, how many thoughts did you have during meditation? Thank you, Raven. Right. Lots of thoughts. They just keep coming and going. That's okay. So our practice is not to stop thoughts. Our practice is to not grab at them, not push them away. Just let them come and go. They'll come and go of their own. Because we are what? We are learning that we can be present to our body and breath and calm ourselves and develop a pool of awareness that is not dependent on thought. Oh, I am more than my thoughts. Right? That's very important to know. So we practice like that. Does that answer your question, Dee? Yeah. Any other questions? You're back again, Vivian, little one? Okay.
We have a comment online from Donna. She says, quantum physics is the science that supports the philosophy of Buddhism.
That's way above my pay grade, but I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Have you felt alignment?
What?
Have you felt alignment?
During the course of practice, we feel all kinds of things. Again, experiences come and go, right? So in Buddhism, it's not experiences that liberates us. It's wisdom, understanding that liberates us, right? So if you what's your favorite food?
Indian food?
Indian food. And you grew up in India?
No.
No. So at some point you had Indian food, and all of a sudden you were awakened to Indian food, right? And in that moment of awakening, was it a good experience?
Yes.
Yes. Right? So all of a sudden your world got larger, didn't it? It's like all of a sudden, because you grew up where?
In Venezuela.
In Venezuela, right? So all of a sudden, right? All of a sudden, for some strange reason, you run into the taste, the experience of Indian food, and your world opens up. I mean, I'm using a very, worldly kind of thing. But you see, you've changed, and all of a sudden you know, wow, is Indian food and all the way they prepare and the spices just like Venezuelan food that you grew up with? No. All of a sudden you know, wow, there's a whole different realm of taste and experience that I've now become enlightened to. Now I'm kind of dumbing it down, but I think it's the same thing. You see, we want to become enlightened to how things really are. And of course, in meditation, one can discover very clearly that the self doesn't exist, that thoughts don't exist, that nothing exists in any inherent way, that there's only awareness. But to have that experience, but not to live it, right? It's like, so what? So you want to live an awakened life. And that's this moment-to-moment ongoing experience.
I didn't know that the name Buddha actually is for enlightenment, and that was not his real name.
No, that was not his real name.
Now, so that means that it can be more than one Buddha, or it has been more than one Buddha?
There can be a Vivian Buddha. How do you like that? You have that already within you. You have an enlightened nature. When the Buddha is just somebody who discovered, who experienced his enlightened nature, her enlightened nature. It's not, the enlightened nature has no characteristics of his or her. So there'll be a Vivian Buddha, right? Yeah, Shakyamuni, Shakya was his clan name. He was of the Shakyas. And Muni means sort of like seer, or so even his name Shakyamuni is just a name that was given him. Okay. It wasn't his family name. So you'll be, Vivian Buddha of Venezuela or something. Any other questions? You know the Holy Trinity? I mean, you probably know more about it than I do. So in Buddhism, we have the three bodies of Buddha. That's what else in the last 5 minutes, I'll just share that with you. Which in 5 minutes I can't do justice to. So this is a very fundamental teaching of the Buddha, that, Buddhas, or this enlightened mind, which all of us have sort of three aspects. Okay. So one of the aspects of mind is what's called the Dharmakaya, or the body. The body. It's really Dharma here means that it's essential body, which is the body of emptiness. There's nothing there. It's beyond birth and death. There's no solidity, like we said earlier. And yet it has this potentiality of everything. It's because things aren't solid. It's because things aren't permanent that creativity and change can occur. Right? If everything was, because everything is made up of parts, the parts can always be rearranged. New parts can be brought in, old parts can be gotten out of. So understanding the essential empty nature of reality, it's like this. You know, this bench, we call this a bench, right? But it's just made up of parts, right? I could rearrange this thing, take it apart, rearrange it a different way, right? This has endless potential for all kinds of things. When I know it's empty of any solidity. Okay, so knowing things are empty is the essential nature. But then that's not enough. The next body is called the Sambhogakaya, or sort of enjoyment body. This is the body of, so what does that mean? It means the adornment, it means all the wholesome qualities of mind, all the noble qualities of mind. These are the manifestation of our Buddha mind. Okay, so this is all in the realm of mind, which all of us have, right? So we all have this empty, aware mind that has the potential for all kinds of wholesome goodness. You know, these are the ornaments of the bodhisattvas. Their ornaments are all these wonderful qualities, right? And then the third body is the Nirmanakaya, and we might call this the physical body, right? This is the seen body. This is the body of birth and death. So like you take somebody like a Buddha, so you take Vivian Buddha back there, one day, we see her body, right? And hopefully when she's a Vivian Buddha, all her actions will come from wisdom and compassion, right? So that's the body we see. But we don't see the mind. The mind has these other two aspects. One of the aspects is this mind. So when we see a really wonderful human being, right, we know them by what? By their actions. You know, the things they do with their body, the way they help people, things they say, right? So we say, oh, that's really a noble person. So we can see that. That's the physical aspects. But the Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, we can't see, but we know it's there, that in their mind has all kinds of noble qualities. And a lot of the ignoble, less desirable ones are not manifesting in their mind, right? And yet, even deeper than that is this understanding of the empty nature of mind, which means it has the possibility of endless creativity, endless manifestation, endless knowing. That's the deeper capability of mind. So those are the Buddhist three bodies. One is physical, two are of the mind. So that's Happy Easter. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Bill might have some final announcements.